With the 1992 season over, it's time to look at all the teams and drivers and see how they made out overall. McLaren Honda, second place, 99 points. Car number 1, Ayrton Senna, 4th place with 50 points. Car number 2, Gerhard Berger, 5th place with 49 points. After 4 consecutive constructors' titles, the final year of the McLaren-Honda combination has been a comparative failure, though with 5 wins and second place overall, plenty of other teams would kill for that level of failure. But the MP47 proved a step behind the dominant Williams, both in terms of its aerodynamics and its lack of active suspension, which was tried out unsuccessfully in its debut put back to 93. The car also proved more unreliable and was usually the case for the working wonders, 5 technical retirements each for the 2 drivers, which meant that the apparently bulletproof Benettons were able to push McLaren hard for second place overall. Much remains uncertain for 1993. It looks like Ford HB engines unless something develops over the winter, with Berger off to Ferrari and Senna still deciding what to do. Both Ron and Bernie will be keen to persuade him to stay, of course, and the lure of getting one over on Prost might well do the trick. Tyrrell Ilmore, 6th place with 8 points. Car number 3, Olivier Guillard, no points. Car number 4, Andrea de Cesaris, 8th place with 8 points. Actually, not a terrible season for Tyrrell, despite the relative lack of sponsorship and resources, and a car that was essentially an updated 1991 chassis. The Ilmore V10 turned out to be better balanced than its Honda predecessor, and Ken Tyrrell was the beneficiary of Eddie Jordan's work the previous year in helping Andrea de Cesaris develop into a better driver. Guillard, on the other hand, showed flashes of decent form, but just as in most of his previous drives, underlined his reputation for being error-prone and uncooperative when being lapped. Another change of engine for next year, another V10, and a new driver and a bit of money from Ukyo Katayama and Cabin Cigarettes, but the team can look back on 1992 with qualified satisfaction. Williams Renault, champions with 164 points. Car number 5, Nigel Mansell, champion with 108 points. Car number 6, Riccardo Patrese, second place with 56 points. Few drivers have dominated a single season as thoroughly as Nigel Mansell did in 1992, but while many are happy for him after all the near misses over the years, there was also a feeling that the Williams was so high-tech that much of the driver's skill had been removed from the equation. A monkey could have won in the Williams Renault was the general feeling. Certainly Riccardo Patrese's much finer feel for a car actually worked against him in the FW14B, where he felt the active suspension and traction control overrode his own instincts, while Mansell's more robust style didn't seem as affected. All of which is not to take away anything from Williams and Renault designers and engineers, of course, who managed to make the updated 1991 car so good they never actually used the new FW15, which will now be updated to the 1993 regulations and still won at a canter. The politics and acrimony of the later season, though, will have left a nasty taste in the mouth, with the Williams-Mansell partnership of 6 years over the last 8 ending in bitterness, and Riccardo Patrese feeling relegated just as he had with Piquet in the early 80s to sidekick and afterthought. Brabham Judd, no points. Car number 7, Eric van der Poel. Car number 8, Giovanna Amati and Damon Hill. And so, it would appear, the long story of the Brabham team comes to an end. In truth, the version of the team that appeared on the grid in 1989 after a year out and its sale by Bernie Ecclestone had always seemed like Brabham in name only, and indeed the team had never really recovered from the departures of Nelson Piquet and Gordon Murray, and the increasing distraction of Ecclestone as his ambitions in F1 outgrew those of a team owner. The BT60 had been half-decent in the hands of the Brundle brothers in 1991, but between the much less experienced drivers, the new engine throwing the balance off and the team's worsening financial straits, the BT60B never really stood a chance. Van der Poel, highly regarded as a street racer in F3000, never really impressed. Giovanna Amati looked completely out of her depth, and while Damon Hill did his best, the team was holed below the waterline by that point and didn't even see out the season. Footwork Mugen Honda, 7th with 6 points. Car number 9, Michele Alboreto, 10th with 6 points. Car number 10, Aguri Suzuki, no points. After a rocky start, the Footworks actually had a pretty good season overall, though an incredibly frustrating one for Michele Alboreto, who put together an unenviable streak of 6 7th places in 8 races in the middle of the season, plus one for Suzuki. The Mugen Honda engine turned out to have lots of grunt, The FA13 chassis was pretty reliable, just 2 technical retirements all year actually for each driver, and it was only bad luck that prevented them doing better. Aguri Suzuki, though, who came highly rated after a couple of good years in the LaRue squad, disappointed, failing to qualify twice and often seeming error-prone, and was mostly dominated by Alboreto, but it's the Italian who moves to make way for the return of Derek Warwick. Lotus Ford, 5th with 13 points. Car number 11, Mika Hakkinen, 8th with 11 points. Car number 12, Johnny Herbert, 15th with 2 points. A huge improvement for Lotus on 1991, and if they'd had the 107 chassis available from the get-go, they might well have beaten Ferrari to best-of-the-rest status in 4th place. Herbert had absolutely rotten luck all year, only clocking 5 finishes, but he edged the qualifying battle over the highly rated Hakkinen and certainly showed he wasn't a number 2 driver in any sense. The 107 was far from perfect, of course. Reliability was an issue for both cars, and the fast ride height suspension system never really worked and was mostly kept switched off. As the team looks forward to 1993, they will be hoping to keep hold of the talented Hakkinen, or at least make bank from his sought-after status, and keep as many of the elements in place as they can in pursuit of a return to the front. Fondmetal Ford, no points. Car number 14, Andrea Chiesa and Eric van der Poel. Car number 15, Gabriele Tarquini. Things had been looking, if not bright, then at least positive during 1991 for Gabriele Rumi's team as he founded his own design studio, but the resulting Fomet 1, which with amendments for the new regulations became the GR01, used early in 92, was a disappointment, and Rumi sold off the design studio and commissioned Sergio Rindland to design a new car. The GR02, when it appeared mid-season, actually looked pretty decent, especially with Tarquini at the wheel, but the inexperienced Chiesa floundered and only qualified for 3 Grand Prix and exited all 3 due to spins or accidents. Tarquini qualified every time but only finished once, 14th at Silverstone, in a blizzard of DNFs mostly due to engine or gearbox and transmission issues. So ironically, it was Brabham refugee Eric van der Poel who took the team's best finish of the year, their only other finish in fact, at his home race where he came home a creditable 10th. But by then the writing was on the wall. It doesn't matter how promising your car is, if you can't finish races you won't get sponsorship, and in the end Gabriele Rumi had to close the doors. March Ilmore, 9th with 3 points. Car 16, Karl Wendlinger, 12th with 3 points, and Jan Lammers. Car 17, Paul Belmondo and Emanuele Naspetti. March are also facing an uncertain future as 1992 draws to a close, though they are moving ahead with a design for a 1993 car, and Jan Lammers is signed up for the full season. But after the collapse of the Leighton House Group at the end of 1991, the team struggled for most of the year with a car very devoid of sponsors, while hopes that the presence of Wendlinger and Ilmore portended more direct involvement from Mercedes disappeared when Peter Sauber entered the fray, taking both driver and engine for his 1993 project. Wendlinger worked miracles with what he had and early on looked really good in qualifying, but slipped back down the grid as the season progressed, while Paul Belmondo struggled for pace, though to be fair to him he finished every race he started, which is more than many can say. The late replacement drivers, Lammers and Naspetti, proved solid enough without really impressing, but by the time they arrived there probably wasn't much they could do in the elderly chassis. Benetton Ford, 3rd with 91 points. Car 19, Michael Schumacher, 3rd with 53 points. Car 20, Martin Brundle, 6th with 38 points. A great season for Benetton, who showed both speed and reliability. Brundle's early season woes in the old car notwithstanding, to threaten the McLaren Williams hegemony at the top of the sport. The Ford HB engine was underpowered compared to the V12 Honda and V10 Renault, and the B192 chassis was lacking the suite of driver aids that Mansell had at his disposal, but it was nimble and responsive. Michael Schumacher really impressed in his first full season in F1, winning the Belgian Grand Prix just a year after his debut, while Martin Brundle pushed him much of the season and could have won in Canada with a bit more luck. Internal team politics as much as on-track performances have seen Brundle shown the door, and to be fair he was dominated in qualifying by Schumacher, but with the best will in the world it seems unlikely that Riccardo Patrese will prove a huge improvement. Benetton still aren't championship contenders quite yet, but they're certainly coming up on the rails and could establish themselves in second place if McLaren's 1993 season is as bad as many expect. Scuderia Italia Dallara Ferrari, 10th with 2 points. Car 21, JJ Leto, no points. Car 22, Pierluigi Martini, 16th with 2 points. A pretty dismal season for Team Italy, with a series of reliability issues combined with an F192 chassis that handled like a bathtub. The team tried out 3 different suppliers of suspension dampers just in an effort to stop it rolling. The drivers, both known to be talented, were thoroughly fed up with it very quickly, despite Martini taking 2 sixth-place finishes early on, but the Italian veteran never really showed the qualifying pace he had at Minardi, while Leto managed to fail to even qualify in Hungary and was fairly anonymous much of the season. All changed for next year, except for the Ferrari engines, which have a new chassis built by Lola instead of Dallara, new drivers, and much else beside. The only way is up, I suppose. Minardi Lamborghini, 12th with 1 point. Car 23, Christian Fittipaldi, 18th with 1 point, and Alessandro Zanardi. Car 24, Gianni Morbidelli, no points. Swapping Ferrari power for elderly Lamborghini units had the predicted effect on Minardi's performance, and things weren't helped by the team's wind tunnel having a data error, something that was discovered partway through the season, by which time it was a bit late, as there was no money to fix the aerodynamics. The M192 understeered, though Gustav Brunner's arrival late on saw his tweaks help the team drag itself off the bottom of the grid and score a double top 10 finish in Adelaide. The drivers were pretty evenly matched, with Christian Fittipaldi probably the pick of an admittedly underwhelming 1992 rookie cadre, and scoring the team's only point just months after breaking his neck in a horrific accident. Given the limitations of the car, there probably wasn't a lot Zanardi could have done with it in the 3 races he drove, but Gianni Morbidelli, a Ferrari race driver last year at Adelaide, might have expected to outshine his teammate a little more. Ligier Renault, 8th with 6 points. Car 25, Thierry Boutsen, 14th with 2 points. Car 26, Eric Comas, 11th with 4 points. Guy Ligier has been here before. Back in the early 80s, his team patiently trod water waiting for a Renault engine deal that would surely propel Les Bleus back to the top. The mini revival of 85 and 86, with Arnoux and Lafitte at the wheel, seems a long time ago now, but at least things began moving in the right direction with the renewal of the association with Renault. The team actually scored points, unlike 1990 and 91, but the JS37 chassis wasn't equal to the task. Its aerodynamics were poor and the suspension spongy. By the end of the season things were improving, but by then Guy Ligier, Eric Comas and Thierry Boutsen had all fallen out with each other, and Guy was also coming under increased political pressure to step aside, the French government wanting to see more of a return on the millions of francs it was pouring in. Comparisons with Williams running exactly the same engine to much better effect hardly helped. What the team will look like in 1993 remains to be seen, especially if someone else does manage to poach those Renault engines. Ferrari, 4th with 21 points. Car 27, Jean Alesi, 7th with 18 points. Car 28, Ivan Capelli, 13th with 3 points, and Nicola Larini. If the Tifosi were unhappy after a winless 1991, they didn't know how good they'd had it. Not since Jody Scheckter's disastrous title defence in 1980 had Ferrari scored so few points, and just 2 podium visits, 3rd in Spain and Canada, for Alesi. The radical new F92A was part of the problem, but a bigger issue was behind the driver, with the V12 engine suffering not only from a lack of power and a lack of development, but a stubborn refusal on the part of the team to acknowledge that that was the issue. Instead, poor Ivan Capelli, who would later describe the F92A as the worst F1 car he ever drove, became the scapegoat, and as early as Monaco he was being given the cold shoulder, the team essentially being a one-car outfit for Alesi. Capelli didn't do himself any favours, to be sure, with the series of spins and accidents, but you can't help feel sorry for a driver who must have felt at the start of the season that all his dreams had come true. Gerhard Berger returns to Ferrari next year, and it'll be interesting to see how well he slots in, given the changes in the team since he's been away, and how the canny old stager stacks up against the young charger in the other car. Venturi LaRousse Lamborghini, 13th with 1 point. Car 29, Bertrand Gachot, 19th with 1 point. Car 30, Ukio Katayama, no points. A tumultuous season for the multicoloured team, with continued issues over ownership and finances, the arrival and departure again of Venturi, Yet another business partner turning out to be a wanted murderer, and a car designed by Fomet and Robin Herd that was, to put it mildly, slow and unreliable. Those big Lamborghini V12s did improve later in the year as the Italian firms did some much-needed development, but Gasho's 10th place on the grid at Monza remained the highlight of the season alongside that vital point in Monaco. In the second car, rookie Ukyo Katayama seemed to struggle for pace, usually qualifying right at the back and occasionally not at all, but he actually had fewer spins and accidents than Gasho did, usually keeping going until the car broke of its own accord. Ken Tyrrell will be hoping that means he won't cost more in car repairs than his cabin sponsorship brings in next year, while LaRousse go into the off-season not knowing if they'll even make the grid in South Africa, and if so, who will be driving, who will be building the chassis, and what engine will be in the back. Jordan Yamaha, 11th with 1 point. Car 32, Stefano Modena, 17th with 1 point. Car 33, Maurizio Gugelmin, no points. The high-flying Jordan squad came down to earth with a big bump in 1992, and given the 192 chassis was essentially just a development of the successful 191 with a modified front wing and an enlarged engine bay, it was pretty obvious early on where the problem was, and it said Yamaha on it. Modena didn't see the checkered flag until Belgium and failed to even qualify 4 times, while Gugelmin had marginally better luck but still only managed 5 finishes. Actually, most of the retirements were due to the Jordan gearbox not mating well with the engine, but the Yamaha was, just as their previous efforts had been, overweight and underpowered. Not only that, but both drivers disappointed. Stefano Modena looked even more miserable than usual, and left pundits wondering exactly why he had been spoken of as a superstar of the future a few years ago, while Gugelmin never looked like much more than a journeyman. The car was mostly to blame, of course, but you have to wonder what Michael Schumacher might have done in the car if Eddie had managed to keep hold of him. Andrea Moda Judd, no points. Car 34, Alex Caffey and Roberto Moreno. Car 35, Enrico Battaglia and Perry McCarthy. We can look back now and laugh at a team so comically out of its depth in Formula One, but if things had developed differently, and Perry McCarthy was right that his team boss was actively trying to injure or kill him, it probably wouldn't seem quite so funny. Early on, it did look like the team were trying hard and just being stymied by red tape and regulation, but it quickly became clear that, in fact, Andrea Sassetti and co. had bitten off far more than they could chew. To be scrupulously fair, they had bought a 1-car team and budgeted for a 1-car entry in 1992, only for the regulations to change to make it 2 cars compulsory, whereas the team simply didn't have the money to do. But while the ever-cheerful Moreno and the hard-trying McCarthy became popular figures in the paddock, Andrea Sassetti quickly became persona non grata as his dodgier business dealings became more and more obvious. He wasn't the first shady businessman in F1, and he undoubtedly won't be the last, and cynics would argue that his main crime was not being successful enough for it to be swept under the carpet, but the tale of Andrea Moda will remain a cautionary one for anyone with a few quid to spend who thinks that this F1 lark looks easy enough.